Yes,
You were born a
I
legend.
agree.
And Christina Tosi just presiding over an amazing, growing empire of fabulous bakeries. So thank you both.
Thank you. We're super excited to be here. So Dory and I had a little chat on the phone last week as she just came back from France.
As you were just leaving LA.
Yeah. Boy, we're busy. And we were talking about a lot of different things when we thought about the word crave. And before I tell you what we started talking about, the thing that occurred to me that I wanted to know the most about this legend, and legend is about the rap sheet of accomplishments.
Yeah.
13 cookbooks.
13.
I
Baker's
feel
dozen.
like
Baker's
we're
dozen.
like girls and pals, and I'm like, oh my gosh, 13 cookbooks, more James Beard awards than I can count on one hand. And I was like, what does this woman, this legend, crave? Like, what do you crave?
You know, I crave, I wonder if it's, let me think about it. I don't think that what I crave has changed all that much over the years. I really love simple foods. So it's really all about flavor. And I was thinking that as I was working on this last book, that over the years, my cooking and my baking has gotten simpler. That when I taught myself to cook, I taught myself to bake, and all I wanted to do was like Baroque stuff. I wanted to learn like how to make the fanciest, sugar flours, how to get the buttercream to go exactly right. I wanted to make croquembouche and I wanted to make coulbiat. Now that's not what I want to do. It's just gotten simpler and simpler.
Yes.
And you?
I'm real funny about what I crave. I grew up, my family's all from Ohio. I was born in Ohio. We were raised between like Ohio and a suburb of Washington, D.C. And I crave the simple foods of like that I remember feeling like I was first discovering life with reckless abandon. So I crave like the American classics, like macaroni and cheese, crave every time. Cheese pizza. I still, as a grown-up, I'm like, I just want cheese on my pizza. That's all I want. I want like chocolate chip cookie dough, either like out of the bowl, like it just got mixed, or my grandma's like warm oatmeal cookie. Those are the things, they fuel so many things about me. And the thing I loved about like fangirling over your newest cookbook, and I showed you like a dork over here because I took a picture of it this morning as I was going through it again, because it's not on the shelves yet, but you sent me a copy, was this quote from you, which this is your 13th cookbook, and you write, these recipes, most of which are simple, turn out food that's comforting, satisfying, inviting, and so often surprising. I love when there's something unexpected in a dish, especially when it's in a dish we think we know well. And I feel like that's the perfect segue to what we crave, but then also this question that we asked each other on the phone a week ago, which was, what makes a great dessert?
And so I just want to back up because
Yes.
I was just listening, and all of you should listen to this. So Christina was the guest on a new podcast called Start to Sail.
Yeah.
And except for the fact that she's so good at what she does, I wrote to her and said, you should give it all up. You should just become an inspirational speaker. You could sell out stadiums around the world. And so Christina on this podcast talks about building the milk bar business, and she talks about herself. And I've thought about this from when I met you, and it came back to me as I was listening to the podcast. You have very specific memories. You can really recall tastes and textures. When Christina talks about food, you can feel her as, reaching back to childhood. And you've managed to take those taste memories and make them cake or make them cookies. You've managed to incorporate, and to me it's really interesting, and I think that maybe we all do it to one degree or another as we're developing, whether it's recipes for cookbooks or dishes for restaurants. But we all draw from what we know and what we love, and we develop our own style.
Yeah.
And
It's like we're sentimentalists, but we're also creators and innovators. And it's this kind of intersection between being sentimental and having very, very simple points, starting points, and then this like nonstop desire to want to either bring something that is unexpected, that makes it fun, that piques curiosity, that like makes your taste buds tickle and dance, and that makes you feel both emotionally attached to what you're eating or what you're baking, and yet still feel renewed and refreshed, and that you're discovering something anew.
so I think that's really important, the idea of discovering just something so that you did something unexpected. And so when I'm working on recipes, I'm always trying, because I often look back, so I look at classics, and I think, what would make something pop? Because, if you've had the same dish over and over, you kind of know what you're getting. The joy of finding a different spice or a texture that got tucked into something when you didn't expect it. And I think that makes food exciting to eat, but it also, as a creator, makes it a whole lot more fun to make it. A girl's got to have fun in the kitchen.
That's right. But
Dory.
there's also like this hidden message that you're giving when you do that, because how many times have you eaten something that you think that it's going to be exactly a certain way, and you eat it, and as you're eating, that moment happens, that unexpected moment happens, and all of a sudden you're like, I get it. I get it. I get what you're doing. I get what you're saying to me through this food, through this little hint of spice or this added texture. And all of a sudden, like, food is we make food to share. We make food
especially
to
dessert.
intrigue. Especially dessert.
So for all the years that I've been doing this, I have tried to make dessert one of the major food groups. You have. No, I think you almost have. I mean, cookies for breakfast, you're almost there.
Almost there.
But really, the only reason we make dessert, there are two reasons. One is for pleasure, and the other is to share. I mean, that we bake in batches.
Yes.
We have to, if we're alone, we'll cook to feed ourselves, and we may cook something really wonderful. But when we bake, it's really to share. And when you think about dessert, I mean, even the simplest cookie is complex. I mean, you have to think about texture.
Texture. What makes a great dessert is the same thing as what makes a great cookie. Texture, for sure.
Texture is so important.
Yes, the composition, always texture. Flavor, and where that flavor is going to come from, because sometimes the flavor should be built into the texture, sometimes not.
I sometimes find it hard to separate texture and flavor, because sometimes the texture is what makes you love something, and it holds the flavor. So if you add nuts to something, you've got to chew those nuts, and so the flavor lasts longer.
Can I
Sugar, because it's dessert. How much sugar? How little sugar? Fat. Girl. Duck fat you use in some of your dessert.
So no.
No,
I haven't.
No?
I did only once. So we don't have time for this, but there's a dessert, a croustade, that's made in Gascony. And the dough is a very, very thin dough. It's almost like phyllo. And the layers are brushed with duck fat.
Yeah.
I did it once.
And?
It was delicious. It was great. And this is all coming. Had prunes soaked in Armagnac. So you had.
Well, come on.
That. Come on.
That was a good dessert. Yeah.
Dory, come on.
Yeah. Thank
Joe,
you.
I feel like we interrupted you.
No, I was
Get in on this
trying. I was
conversation.
trying to interrupt you, and you wouldn't let me. You're very good. You're so good. No, when you were talking about finding the little thing that leads to the surprise in the nostalgic, comforting dish, I was just dying for some examples from each of you. Like, when have you done that, and like, what has it been, and are there things that you haven't done that you think you might do?
Oh, I hope there are things I haven't done.
Girl, you're unstoppable as far as I'm
There
concerned.
definitely are, but I mean, what's on your mind in terms of those kinds of things now that you maybe haven't shared yet?
So this isn't dessert, but I just added walnuts to meatballs and spaghetti, because meatballs. I mean, we all love them, but you chew them and you chew. I mean, they're not all that interesting. And so I thought, if they had something surprising in them, if they
Beans.
had walnuts, right?
Beans.
So, beans, yeah. If they had, no. Sorry,
here for
Joe. No, but so adding that little bit of texture so that I love when you're eating something and each bite is a little different, right? So I don't like chocolate chips. I like chunks of chocolate, and I like the dust when you're chopping chocolate and it gets dusty, and you put the dust in and it makes the cookie tweety, but it also means that each bite has a different ratio of...
For sure.
It
You
is
know
ratio,
when you
right?
got a chunk, and you know when you got a little dust, and you know when you didn't get either, and it makes your brain come alive. Like, that's what good food does.
It's that pop.
It's that pop.
So speaking of pop, your popcorn cake.
Yeah, good. Give me some, girl. That was the best transition all night. Popcorn cake is like a great example.
Yeah.
To even answer your question, Joe, whenever we're in the kitchen at Milk Bar, like the number one rule is, what's the point of inspiration? What is the point of inspiration? The number two rule is you can never make something that's already existed, because we're not here to compete with like my grandma's oatmeal cookie, because she's only going to be the one that makes it exactly the way, because there's something about her touch, there's something about the way she makes it and it feels when she shares it with me. All of these things, it's certainly about texture and flavor and this and that, but it's also about who's making it and the time and the place and so on. So our first two rules are basically that, and what we love doing is going, okay, well, what is it about popcorn? What is popcorn cake, which is part of my new cookbook that's coming out around the same time as yours, October 23rd, same as Carla's. It's called Milk Bar All About Cake.
Wow.
It's a big
It's a
day.
good
It's
day.
a
It's a
good
good day.
season for cookbooks, outright. But it's the recipe is in that cookbook, and I start to tell the story about, well, it was winter. It was, a few years ago, it was winter at Milk Bar, and we're all like in our turtlenecks and beanies that we refuse to take off. And we're sitting around talking about, like, okay, well, what do we want to work on right now? We're kind of like, we have that gloom of the winter that you get sometimes when it's February and it doesn't feel like spring's coming anytime soon. And we started joking around that what we were all doing with our free time was basically like bundling up and going to the movie theaters and watching sometimes one, usually two, sometimes three movies. And the beauty of just like digging into what feels like a bottomless cup of super buttery popcorn, and then like the slurp of a Coke, and maybe the handful of a bunch of gummy bears. And so we started going like, okay, so what does this mean? We all started getting really excited and really emotional and having that craveable moment and trying to figure out how we wanted to translate it into a dessert. And one of my favorite vehicles for flavor, though something that I didn't always crave, is layer cake. And it's because I had to figure out what layer cake should mean to me to be super craveable, which is a long story. But layer cake, the way we build them at Milk Bar, provides so many different literal layers for flavor and flavor combinations and texture. And so we went down this whole rabbit hole of trying to bring in not just buttered popcorn, but Coca-Cola and gummy bears and maybe Thin Mints. And we were like, this is a no. It's a yes in the dark when no one's looking and you're like watching the rocks